when I get stuck, I go to a bookstore. I used to do that in St. Louis all the time. It was just, I needed to go be surrounded by that stuff. You had written a headline that I couldn't find visuals for, and I found this divorced couple's photo album. And it was so sad to me. Like, I was looking through it and just feeling so bad for these people. And then I saw this image of this guy and I was like, oh my good God. Thank you, Lord, and baby Jesus, for putting this in my lap. And thank you to this couple for getting divorced and taking their books, their photo album to a used bookstore in Portland, Oregon.
It's Jason Bagley's advertising podcast. He interviews important people, it's true. But that doesn't mean that you're not important, 'cause he didn't choose to interview you. Maybe he was just planning to contact you to interview you on another day. Or maybe he doesn't have your email address. Every creature on the planet is important in their own special way. Cows, sharks, and gazelles deserve to be interviewed. Birds and whales each have a valid point of view. I mean, they're probably not as interesting to talk to as you, but you're less interesting than the person on this show. It's true, I'm not sure what my point is.
Welcome to this week's episode of Bagley Talks to Important Person. I don't know if I could possibly be any more excited to share this interview. Finally going to give some love to all you art directors out there with one of the absolute legends to ever work in the industry. He basically put KFC back on the map, led all design and art direction as well as all creative execution with his partner Carl Lieberman. And here's just a tiny sampling of some of the work he helped create.
Launch a chicken sandwich into space. Make a robotic Colonel Sanders that you could order food from. Write a romance novel. Make myself a playable character in WWE 2K18. Create an e-store where KFC fans can purchase pillows and $20,000 meteorites shaped like a chicken sandwich and even a cell signal blocking dome you can eat dinner in with your families. So cozy. Announce the first ever female Colonel Sanders. Make a virtual reality training experience / escape room. Make these handsome Halloween masks. Make the world's smallest functioning fast food restaurant. Oh, make a fancy highfalutin cooking show on Bon Appetit. Auction off a bunch of my belongings during a live auction on Instagram. Invent a new form of GPS that uses only my voice and cassette tapes. Team up with Green Lantern in a DC comic. And unfollow everyone on Twitter, and then refollow just the Spice Girls and 6 guys named Herb. Get it? 11 herbs and spices. It may not seem like a big deal, but a couple billion eyeballs seem to care.
We are longtime friends and longtime partners, first as creatives many years ago, then as co-creative directors on Old Spice for many years, and then after a long gap, reunited as executive creative directors of the Portland office of Wieden+Kennedy. Couldn't be more excited to introduce you to my dear friend, my old partner, Eric Baldwin.
Recording in progress.
Recording in progress. Eric Baldwin, my old partner, my dear friend from a long time of yesterfar. Welcome to Bagley Talks to an Important Person. You are the important person.
Yes! Welcome. Finally! Thank you.
You've always been an important person. So we go way back.
Yes.
Way back. You worked at Wieden almost as long as I did. And the funny thing is that I don't know how long you worked right next to me as a freelancer without us ever so much as saying hello, I think. Felt like
it was only like 3 months, 3 or 4 months that you and Jeff Williams never acknowledged any of our existences.
Yes, that's what happened. I apologize for that. I don't know why we were so antisocial. But then we got put on you were a stranger to me.
Yes.
But we were instantly thick as thieves when we got put on a Old Spice assignment together. And yes. We've worked for many, many years off and on since that time. And wonderful memories. I've never been able to grow a beard as thick and lustrous as yours. You grow wonderful facial hair. I grow wonderful head.
It's true. It's when you're if you're both bald, it doesn't really work that well. I learned that from experience.
Yeah. So how did you get started? How did you become an art director, of a human art director of planet Earth?
You want me to go all the way back? How long do you want this part of the interview to be?
Very short.
So I don't ramble.
Give us a brief kind of background of why, briefly, how did you get into this? Why are you even interested in the dark arts of graphic design and art direction?
Yeah, my dad was an art director. You know that, obviously, but the people that are watching this video don't know this, and this is why you're asking.
Let's pretend that I don't know.
Well, my dad was an art. Yeah, he was an art director in the 70s at like a regional ad agency in St. Louis. It was what was it? Darcy McManus, Benton and Bowles, I believe is what it was, but he just called it Darcy. He was an artist and a craftsman and an illustrator, and I kind of grew up around, all the advertising stuff and toxic design markers and all the chemicals and cigarette smoke, and would go in there on the weekends and just make things. And I was always drawing and making things. And, when I got older and had to figure out what I wanted to do, for the real deal, what I wanted to go to school for, I thought I wanted to be a comic book illustrator. And then I realized that was just good. I was pretty good, but I didn't think I was going to have what it took to have that slog. So I switched to graphic design because I didn't want to work in advertising initially. I didn't really like a lot of the people that I met in advertising. And then in college, all the advertising kids were just assholes and, thought they were better than everybody. And so I got into graphic design, started in graphic design, but I always loved the full picture. And so I liked doing film and things like that when I was a kid. I made, videos and all that stuff. We had all, the camera and everything. Growing up in rural Missouri, wasn't much to do. So we made a lot of videos, but I ended up going to work at a place called Pena Brand, and it was this design. I found this place is what I thought was a design firm in California. I'd been trying to get to California for a while. I'll get out of Missouri, and so I found this little design shop and went out to interview with them and realized it was the design firm within Butler, Shine and Stern. And I was kind of bummed out because I was like, crap. How did I end up working for an ad agency? I wanted to come out here and work for this design firm.
They Trojan horsed you.
Totally. So I loved Luis Pena. He's a really great guy. And he was the design director there at the time. And he brought me in. I happened to sit next to a guy named Ricardo Viramontes, who will come back later in a second in the story, but he's the CCO of Uninterrupted, LeBron James company. So he's a good friend of mine, but he was an intern, and when I got hired, he lost his internship. So he always gives me a hard time about making him lose his job. But anyway, John Butler, saw some of the stuff that I was doing. I think he saw thinking. I think he saw ideas in some of my design work that I was doing. And he started pulling me in on design, advertising projects, as an art director. And Ricardo became an art director at Butler Shine, worked there for a few years, and then ultimately went and got a job at Wieden+Kennedy, New York. And he called me and he was like, "Hey man," he's like, send me a bunch of your sports work. He was at Wieden, New York. And I had left left Butler Shine to go freelance. And so I sent him a bunch of the Converse. We had Converse at Butler Shine at the time, ironically, that we had it at Wieden as well. But
sorry, just to jump in, by that time you were running the design department at Butler Shine.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that part. Yeah, so when in Luis's absence, I basically stepped in and started running the design department, and we were getting design projects that were coming through, and I was trying to build a group. But at the same time, John was kind of pulling me in the art direction path. And then I just got burned out. I mean, it was crazy hours at working, probably every other weekend, sleeping at the office, all that stuff. Just insane amounts of work, but really good opportunity. So I was, stupid and did all that. Anyway, when I left, Ricardo, he said, you should come freelance here at Wieden, New York as an art director. And I don't think I had even been to New York when he called me. So I was 28, 29 years old. And I don't think I'd ever been to New York. And he's like, come out here and be an art director in this, in New York City. So I ended up taking him up on it because he was just like, you'll make more money than you'll ever make as a graphic designer and it'll be fun. So I went out and worked on Jordan Brand for 3 months, and New York was just super oppressive for me. It just felt, that's why I live in Portland, Oregon, Bagley. The woods are much, much nicer for my soul. And thinking about moving to New York, like visiting there, I love it, but thinking about moving to New York, I was worried that they were going to offer me a job. So I was thinking like, oh, could I live here? And I was like, I don't think I can live here. So Todd Waterbury and Kevin Proudfoot were the ECDs at the time, and they offered me a job at the New York office. And I was like, I can't believe I'm saying this, but no, I can't live in New York City. And they were like, crap, well, what do you like? And I was like, I don't know. I like trees and hiking and camping and like, I'm not much, the city, like I like to go be close to a city so I can go to the city, but I don't want to necessarily live in the city. And my wife and I are, we want to start a family. I want to buy a house. And Todd just looked at me and said, all right, I'm sending you to Susan. So I came out to Portland to work with Susan Hoffman and Mark Fensky on Target. And I got there, and what I realized that was kind of in my face the whole time was that I would be able to work on TV spots too. Like it hadn't really connected. And I had a partner at the time, and he was kind of struggling with we're supposed to be writing comedy scripts, and he was struggling. And so I had to kind of jump in, and it was the first time I'd ever done it, but I was like starting writing right away. And that was exciting to me because it was new. It was this new skill set that I hadn't really tapped into before. So that ultimately
you're still freelance at this time.
Yeah. And so I just kind of kept having these experiences where I realized, oh man, I can impact the look of everything. If I'm an art director, I can do all this stuff. I don't have to just do the brochure for the Converse shoe. I can do the brochure for the Converse shoe. I can do the box design for the Converse shoe. I can do the commercial for the Converse shoe. I can do whatever stunt, all the things that you're supposed to do now. I was wanting to do, it's why you and I got along so well. We always wanted to do these, like we never just stopped. We'd get a brief for TV. And do you remember the first brief we were on was the Tony Stewart brief was that the first one? Yeah.
Yeah. I think
with the armpits. And we had that, remember they didn't ask for a print ad. We had a flap that you could lift up Tony Stewart's race suit, and under there was his bare armpit. And it was a scent strip because they were always asking us for scent strip technology. Yeah. And they wouldn't do it because they were grossed out by his armpit hair. They're like, that's too gross. We can't do it. But I still think, I don't know why we never did that afterwards where you could lift and peel and smell. Maybe you guys did after I came off that brand, but
we did some scent strip stuff, but not that particular one. Well, no, we did it. You and I did it together on the nature scent stuff. There was some scratch and sniff. It wasn't.
That's right.
But
that's right.
You scratch the armpit and you could smell the scent.
That's right.
But anyway, so you start to realize that as an art director, you are going to have most all the opportunities that a graphic designer has, plus a lot more. And you get to influence a lot more things.
Yeah. And it was interesting because, people tried to push me away from just doing my own design and making my own things when I became an art director. Like when I got to Wieden, I was like full court press from my CD at the time, being like, why are you doing all this work? Go work with the studio. And I'm like, no, I love this part. Like, this is the making part. I get to sit down and play around and do some research and look at some books. And, this is all where it all kind of starts to come together, is that we had these ideas together. And, I wanted you to come in and help me, does this look right? Is this a good way to do it? Is this communicating it the right way? And I didn't want to you and me have to do that. And I have to go tell somebody else where, cause we were in it, as art director and copywriter. I don't know. I'm probably old fashioned in that way. I still feel art directors should be able to do more than just, having an opinion. They should be able to make stuff.
So talk about that for a second, because not every agency has a design studio. Most of the bigger ones have some form of that.
Mm-hmm.
But for art directors that do have designers that they are able to work with, or a design studio or whatever, what advice would you give them? Because I know that you have a strong point of view on art directors that just like plop stuff down in front of a designer and like figure it out. So
yeah.
How do you think it should work?
I think it should be as collaborative between the art director and the designer. If you're going to work with a designer, that's your partner, and you should view that person as your partner in the process of what you're doing. You know what I mean? Sometimes that gets a little confused and people think, oh, now I have a third partner and they're going to come in and comment on the TV or whatever, but that's not what I mean. I just mean any sort of, visual ideation or visual aesthetic, you should lean into them as a partner. If obviously it depends on the person you're working with. If they're a more junior person, you're probably going to have to teach them more and bring them along. But if they're a more established mid-level senior designer, they're going to come up with ideas that you hadn't come up with, that you hadn't thought of. And that's only going to make your work better. So I think you should have a really strong idea as an art director. You should have visual reference, stylistic reference. You should have a sketch. If you have an idea and you want somebody to execute your idea, you should be able to articulate the idea, the overarching idea, the strategy, all of the information that you got to get you to that point. You need to now download into that designer's head, so they have that information, so they can design from the same place.
Yeah, I think one of the things I tell creatives is force yourself to have a point of view. Like, if you don't know, that's not good enough. Don't just go to a designer and be like, I don't know what it should be. You figure it out. Like, force yourself to figure out what you think. It doesn't mean you're going to come to the final conclusion, but like, figure out a point of view. Ask yourself enough questions about the brand, about the project, about what you're trying to communicate. And based on all of those things and what the concept is, what do you think it should look like? What do you think the direction it should go? What are some references? What's the photographic style? And then deliver that to the art director. And what I'm hearing from you is like, be totally open-minded to them either adding on to that or having completely different ideas. But you got to at least start with a point of view, an idea, some direction, and don't just be lazy, because that's making you weak as a creative. The more you can develop your point of view and force yourself to have a point of view, the stronger your voice becomes. And you can always be open to changing that point of view, but you got to at least have one.
Yeah. And if you don't have a point of view and you want to do I don't know, some art directors don't want to do all the things that I like doing, being able to do design, or like, it's as ugly as it is now. Like the Swagger logo that was on the bottle for years was something I designed for an ad, and I worked with a graphic designer to refine it and fine tune it to make it, better than the sketch that I had. But I think if you don't have a point of view, you're stuck in the one place that you got to. You can't expand and come up with, ideas outside of the one place that the execution that you're trying to create. And I think you should definitely, I always told designers, there were some designers that I knew maybe weren't, as senior or seasoned designers that I would use in a certain way, but I was always kind and still did all the explaining of the idea and gave them all the information. But I might know, or I might not be sure if they could, they're going to their time is going to be best spent coming up with another version. But other designers, that I had a good rapport with and that I knew were, visual thinkers, I would say, here's what I think it should be. Here's my sketch. Here's my reference. Here's some typography, talking to them about the overall idea, giving them all that information and saying, that said, I'm not precious. If you can come up with a better way to articulate this idea, go for it, because that's better for everybody.
What do you think when you're setting it either as a creative director or as an art director, when you have a concept, like let's say you have an idea for the campaign,
mm-hmm.
What are you looking for the art direction to do? Like on the sort of high level philosophical point of view, what's the role of art direction, and what bar are you trying to reach, or what is your goal for the art direction?
It's probably, and again, this doesn't sound old fashioned because it's a magazine term, but if like they're turning the pages of a magazine and the image is just visually, the visual energy is so arresting that you have to, you want to read to see what it is. What's that? Like, you should have that feeling of like, that's why I always, when you look at like an archive magazine and there's all these like templatized ads that used to happen in the 90s, before many of these students, I'm sure, were born. Like it was all like formula based, if you were selling LL Bean, I don't know, a bag, it was like the white background with the type perfectly centered. And there were like almost like templates. Yeah. It was like more templatized. And I think you have to kind of like, as an art director, you have to think about a brand and think about it, when you come up with the idea and the point of view, what energy that should have. Because sometimes it's like bombastic, loud energy, like our Powerade work that we'll talk about later, or, simple, subtle, like a Nike, just type on black. But even that, Nike's owned that for years. Everybody does that now. It's like we all sort of get into these, ruts of like kind of doing the same things over and over. Now I'm getting onto a tangent. Sorry, I'll stop.
No, I think I think in the broadest sense, you're trying to tickle people's eyeballs and make them pay attention. And I think lean into the conceptual idea and support that the visual should support the voice of the brand and and that particular concept. So in some cases, supporting the concept is going to be a very understated, like, don't get in the way of it. The design shouldn't get in the way of the concept. And in other cases, if the voice is bombastic and hyperbolic, then maybe the design can be too, which I think, again, we'll talk about that with the Powerade work a little bit. But I think another way of saying, I think what you're saying is just like, it should be just like everything else we're doing creatively. Like, it should grab your attention. It should be interesting. It should make you want to pay attention, and it should support the conceptual idea.
Right.
That you're doing.
Yeah. If you're designing and it's like ornamentation and it doesn't add to the voice, or, that's why I was saying like energy. I hadn't really thought about that before, but like the energy of the voice, you can't let it. Sometimes you as a art director or a, maker type person, designer, you want to try a style out. You're like, oh man, I really want to make something, that looks like X. I love that look and feel. I want to do that someday. I want to do a Jacques Tati, aesthetic, or Wes Anderson for people who don't go. That's where Wes Anderson got it, from Jacques Tati. But you can want to do that, but it's not always right. Sometimes it works out, but other times it just becomes a distraction.
But it's good to have. I've noticed something with you and all the good art directors I've worked with. You have a big archive of references that are things you just love. You don't know when you're going to be able to use it, but you've got a bunch of typefaces and you got a bunch of posters, and you got just things that you're kind of a student of design and art direction and a fan of it. And so you've got all these things that you can look to possibly influence campaigns. And like you said, sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes something you want to use is not going to work for a campaign, but a lot of times you'll eventually find a place for it.
Yeah. I mean, that's, I would say the bulk of my concepting starts by looking at reference, whether it's a book, whether it's reference I pulled, or if it's a new book I get. Like, it doesn't even have to be related to what I'm thinking about. It's just the process of looking at something exciting does something. I don't know what it does to my brain. It distracts me long enough that I'll have an idea, Yeah. And so, I think if you don't love like consuming visuals in some way, shape, or form, like I used to be, big into, when I first started, there was this, because I was in Missouri, and everybody looked to like Minneapolis design scene was like the thing. And so there was Charles S. Anderson was a guy that I thought was doing some cool stuff with like vintage, like taking vintage design and making it look modern and new, like kind of messing with the look. And so I used to go into like antique shops and thrift stores, and I would just go find the paper stuff. Like, where's the paper? Where are the matchbooks? Where are the postcards? Like, just whatever ephemera I could find to have. It's like magic. It's like, I think it's like, how some people hold crystals. Like, I think that's part of it for me, is like, I'm taking the energy from the beautiful art, and it's coming into my brain and giving me ideas.
And I think I'm a huge fan of design and anything visually like interesting. And I love to look at cool stuff. And I find it very inspiring. I've always liked seeing the inspiration from my art directors. Like, if they're putting stuff on the wall, that inspires me. It gives me ideas, conceptual ideas, headline ideas, whatever. As a writer, I get really inspired by that stuff. So I'm always a fan personally of seeing design, what my art directors are working on, or just walking through the design studio and seeing the other cool things that are happening. I think creativity at its best should always go both ways. Like, you get design ideas from seeing the writing or a script or a headline, and the writer gets ideas from seeing like amazing design stuff. Why don't we I have a lot more questions, but why don't we just get into it? And you want to talk a little bit, I asked you to talk a little bit about a couple of campaigns and kind of your process and how you approach art direction on something. And so you can start with whichever one you want to start with.
Why don't I start with Powerade? I don't have a ton from it, but let's start with that since we were talking about it. And maybe I can just, before I start showing, because unfortunately, I don't know where all the versions of this thing, all the experiments we did are. I just had the final ones that I saved. They're archived somewhere. I couldn't find them. But with Powerade, we were trying to relaunch them as a brand, right? Like, we were trying to give them a new tagline. And can you help me remember that? I'm so bad at remembering these things.
So they really wanted to talk about their formula, which
that's right.
Which frankly was not. It was just pure marketing, because it wasn't anything new, and it wasn't anything different from Gatorade or anything else. And it was really a relaunch and a repositioning of the brand. And I've actually shown our war room that we like completely covered with papers, just stacks and stacks of papers. The walls were covered with papers, and we just attacked it from a million different directions. And that was a great example. That was a really fun and inspiring process because you were putting a lot of pictures. Like we were putting headlines, we were putting ideas, concepts, activation ideas.
Well, remember we had the 100, we would do whatever our challenge was.
Yeah.
And my thing was like, well, I want some of mine to be able to be pictures. And I think we came up with a percentage, and they couldn't just be a picture. I had to have an idea about it. Sometimes there were just pictures because I knew you guys would enjoy looking at a picture, because you have to do that. Just like when you're presenting to your creative director, you always want to have, what's the thing I don't think they're gonna be able to buy in there, because you never know, and you always hope that one of your softballs are gonna get in there. But yeah, that was a really fun process, because it was the first time I had worked with two writers at once, and you guys were so prolific. It was just inspiring to see all the things that you guys are coming up with, and the ideas, and being in the room and being intimidated and nervous, and using all that to put stuff up on the wall. I don't know do you remember, were you with me when I found that, when I went to Cameron's? So we were trying to come up with ideas, and I was trying to find visuals for some of the lines you were writing, and I went down to Cameron's and I found that divorced couple's wedding album.
No, I thought that's something you had found like years prior.
No, so I was stuck. I couldn't, I don't know if this is kind of process, I guess, but like when I get stuck, I go to a bookstore, or I would go to like Cameron's is in Portland. What, I don't know, is it still there? Portland bookstore. That was just like, I used to do that in St. Louis all the time. It was just, I needed to go be surrounded by that stuff, and I would find something in there that would help me. It was just, it was like I put out the vibes of give me something. And you had written a headline that I couldn't find visuals for, and I found this divorced couple's photo album. And it was so sad to me. Like I was looking through it and just feeling so bad for these people. And then I saw this image of this guy, and I was like, oh my good God. Thank you, Lord and baby Jesus, for putting this in my lap. And thank you to this couple for getting divorced and taking their books, their photo album to a used bookstore in Portland, Oregon.
So now, since we're talking about it, do you have that ad?
Yeah, I do have that one. Let's see.
We can show you actually. And I remember when you came back, I think you showed it to me with the headline on it. And I instantly was like, oh, wow, that's fantastic. I love it.
There it is. LeBron's going to dunk so hard, divorced couples fall back in love and get remarried. And it's hydration plus energy equals power. I think that was us we were just kind of thumbing our nose at their tagline, weren't we? Like, cause it was like,
well, I think we were doing a technique that this might've been kind of early days of a technique that we would both end up using a lot in our career of, if you can find a way to give the client exactly what they want in a way that doesn't hurt the concept or hurt the ad, then do it, because you're going to have a way better chance of selling it. Now, ironically, we didn't sell this campaign, but if you can, the more you can just like check off their boxes and just give them what they want, so that usually what that means is they will give you more leeway and more freedom in the rest of the execution. And so I think that's part of what we were trying to do here is like, they were so obsessed with this stupid formula, which really didn't mean anything. So we're like, let's just give them the formula, and then maybe they'll let us do this other crazy stuff. But yeah, right when I saw this layout and just the way you like the photographs were overlapped and they're not perfectly lined up.
You can see right here, I threw them. They were curling up because they were glued down to the page. So I threw them on the scanner bed And this is a piece of the printer. I put a ream of printer paper on it to flatten them out. And they just happened to suck under each other like that. And it just happened to work out.
So a happy accident.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to point out that this isn't the first thing you tried. You tried to put a lot of effort into some other layouts that were really cool, but we ended up feeling like maybe they were getting in the way of the concept a little bit.
That's kind of something that when I was saying earlier, that you have a thing that you want to do and you like it artistically, and your partner or partners in this case will really like an idea. And so I had a miniature. I wanted to build everything in miniatures. And it never went really any further than that, because we were like, it doesn't work. It doesn't have the right energy. It felt too twee, where this felt like it needed to be bombastic. We're talking about power, because the whole campaign, that's what we were selling was power. Doing a miniature execution, as fun as it would have been, I don't think we would have liked it nearly as much, because it didn't help deliver on the concept and the sort of the energy.
It was like too considered or delicate or something that didn't quite match the bombastic voice.
Yeah. And then even down to here, let's show this. Have you showed them your letter to North Korea and Iran?
I don't think so.
This was tempting. I was tempted to make this into something different. And the idea was to write out that the people who are running Powerade are young children, teenagers that skateboarding and all the extreme sports, and they were running the company. It's kind of what if you remember Bagley, that's kind of how we put our mindset around this, is that the kids that you want to drink the Powerade are running the company. And so they would want to write a letter. And I do remember feeling like, I'll do something cool with this, because I had the other stuff, right? I had the other look and feel that we liked. And I had the headline was in that type at first, Dear North Korea and Iran. And we were like, you know what? This needs to look like a child wrote it, like a really naive, a teenage, naive person who's lived in a cave for their entire life. And maybe they're in some sort of cult-like religion should write this. So you wrote this. I was like, Bagley, here you, because you're left-handed. And I knew what your handwriting looked like. And mine, because I'm an art director, I have I've worked on my handwriting.
Mine looks like crap is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's never, because I'm left-handed, I can't write in straight lines across usually. But
yeah.
One of us should read this out loud.
You should read it out loud.
So the idea was that we would run full page newspaper and magazine ads where Powerade does an open letter to North Korea and Iran. And so it says, Dear North Korea / Iran, remember the beginning of Terminator 2, how everything was getting blown up for 2 hours? Moral of the story, crazy junk happens when things get out of control. We should know we made a sports drink so powerful that NASA wouldn't even touch it because they were like, forget that. Number 1, renounce your nuclear weapons. Number 2, let's start a dialogue. C, what time zone are you in? 4, stand down. 5, it's all cool. Much thanks, Powerade. Just written by an idiot.
We'll get back to Eric and Jason in a moment, but if you want to listen to the full version of this episode and all other full episodes of Bagley Talks to an Important Person, check out Creative Mega Machine, Jason's exclusive 8-week creative coaching and mentorship program where Jason throws 6 metric tons of highly illegal, non-EPA approved rocket fuel on your career. Creative Mega Machine is a time machine for your career, teaching you exactly how to get the best work of your life about a decade earlier than you would otherwise. Through on-demand lessons and live Q&As with Jason, he will personally answer all your questions as he reveals all the secrets and techniques that he and his teams use to create iconic campaigns for Nike, Old Spice, KFC, Meow Wolf, and more. You will learn in 8 weeks what took him 16 years at Wieden+Kennedy to learn. There is absolutely nothing out there that will accelerate your creativity and earning potential faster than this 5-star rated program. Classes are capped at 20 students, so grab your spot before they're gone. Check out the show notes below to learn more about Creative Mega Machine. Let's get back to the podcast.
There's this one too we should look at. Someone's going to hit a home run so hard Castro's beard's going to fall off.
Yeah, I think I just love, I loved you. We tried a lot of things. You tried a lot of things, but as soon as I saw this custom font that you created and all these different like photographic and graphic sort of maps and stuff, I was just like, done. This is fantastic.
I think it's because it has the, vibe or energy or whatever of that the voice is, it's like the voice isn't trying too hard, it's not being serious. So it's like, oh, we can be fun and playful and, have the equation coming out of the Powerade bottle, like a fortune cookie. I remember we talked about like just how fun that was. And it was all trying to reinforce, again, these lines. You guys had wrote these lines before we really landed on any, layouts or anything like that. So I had all these great lines to work with. And it's like, when you see something like that, someone's going to hit a home run so hard Castro's beard falls off. It's like, you got to find a way to have the energy, but not have it doing too much. There were a lot of these layouts that I remember that were just doing too much. And the ones that were simpler with, more basic illustrations or photos were just better.
And I think one of the principles that I take away from that is you need to do something as an art director that you love, that you're excited. You need to come up with something that you're super excited about, that you're in love with, but also have the discipline to recognize when it's not serving the idea. Because like with that open letter to North Korea/Iran, you were tempted as an art director to design that more, but you recognized actually the conceptual idea works better if it looks like a teenage idiot wrote it. And same thing with the kind of miniature thing. You love that, but it didn't serve the concept. And then you eventually came up with this other thing that we all love that felt like it really fit the campaign. And what inspired you to design a custom font, and what was that? Like, was it just a random thing you tried, or was it based on anything? Because
I was trying a lot of stuff with type, with computer type, and it all just felt, again, and this energy thing. I don't know. I've been getting into, what just happened there? Oh, that clicked over the top. I've been getting into learning about Buddhism more, trying to be in touch, and I've been reading Ram Dass. Don't get me started. I won't start. But anyway, the energy around a machine computer driven typeface just didn't feel right for this tone that was like so just like ridiculous and like hyperbolic. And anytime I said it in a typeface, it just felt very serious. It felt corporate. And I think, we had decided that it was like, oh no, these are teenagers that are running the company. Well, they would just probably write it down and slap some photos down and just put the type on top of it. And not, some of the early ones were really hard to read, if you remember, because I refused to make them legible because I like the idea that they would be a little hard, difficult to read.
Did you ever try one that was built out of dynamite? That it was like little sticks of dynamite that made the letters?
I may have. I think that was an idea, a typeface made out of dynamite. I think that was somebody who wrote that down.
Well, it's in one of the headlines. It's like somebody's going to catch a pass so amazing they have to invent a new language out of dynamite just to describe what happened. But anyway, you tried a bunch of things, and there's I think the point is there's a concept behind it. There's, as crazy as things may look, there's actually a lot of thought and consideration and a lot of experimentation that went into it that gets you to a point where, all of these elements are really amplifying the idea they're making. Because I look at those headlines and I'm proud of the headlines and Tyler McKellar was the other copywriter. So shout out to Tyler. But they're great headlines, but they became 10 times better once I saw like what you did with the art direction. I think that's what amazing art direction can do, is it just like amplifies the concept and makes it so much more exciting.
Yeah, I think it, and I like, that's the thing that I liked about advertising. I liked the challenge of it. I liked having the constraints of like, oh no, this isn't an art project. This is like a communication piece. And I need people to feel, when they read this and look at this, I need them to feel a certain way. Otherwise they won't get it. They'll just be like, wait, what? Why is it's like art for art's sake, you know? Like Kanye's doing that. He's got that market corner, just art for art's sake. So like, do that in your free time. Like, but when it comes to advertising, I think there's something nice about the restrictions that it puts on you to force you to like, I don't know, I think that's where really good work comes from.
Yeah. So let's move on to KFC, and I'll just kind of set this up that you were instrumental in kind of re-establishing the look of Old Spice, and kind of in a similar way that you would go on to later do with KFC, kind of looking through the archives and looking through the design elements of Old Spice and like, what is there? Because it looked like crap when Wieden+Kennedy started it. There was nothing. You would have thought like, let's just throw everything out. Let's just start over. Let's make a new brand. But you started by saying like, what can we salvage? Are there things that could be interesting? The Old Spice schooner, the ship, and you kind of started pulling from those and then modernizing those. But without talking too much about Old Spice, then when you became the creative director on KFC and helped bring that brand into the agency, talk about that process of what you did and you know, why didn't that the brand was in horrible shape. It was horrific. The ads that were being done were awful. Everything looked awful. It was terrible. Why didn't you just like scorched earth, start over and make a totally new brand? And I
mean, it's probably because of that experience on Old Spice, you know, and I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier on is I always like to go, you know, digging through people's things that they don't want anymore. Like, give me the paper. Where's the paper in this junk shop? And I want to look through it. And it was kind of the same thing with Old Spice. And then that I remembered, I was like, hey, they're like, they have an archive. I was like, wait, what? Because I remembered, you know, my grandpa had the Bowie bottle of cologne. He wore that. And I remembered seeing those, and there were all these crazy decanters that they had. And I know you said not to talk about Old Spice, but sorry. They had all these decanters, and I remember my grandpa having these, and he would get them for Christmas. And so I was like, I know there's gold in them Nar Hills. So I flew out to Cincinnati with a designer, the same kind of process we did for KFC. But it was actually after the fact. I in order to win the business, or to decide if we wanted to do the business. Oh, and I should back up, and I should say the KFC thing was kind of the perfect storm. I really think, because not only had we done Old Spice, you know, I worked on Levi's, where, you know, with their archive, like a lot of brands that I worked on have had archives, and there's things like Velveeta, there's things you can pull out of those archives, and it's helpful, because you'll probably like some of the older stuff that's in there. It'll look better than what the current stuff is. And there's a thing you can point to say, like, let's modernize that. That's part of your brand DNA. Let's pull that to the front. And so when So Kevin Hockman, who was our client at Old Spice, who was our client at the time of Man Your Man Can Smell Like, went to KFC, and he knew. So with Old Spice, we were kind of like bringing them along. Kevin was already there. Kevin wanted to do this big, the thing we were calling branded everything in years later. Kevin wanted to do that. That's why he brought us in. So I just did, it was a very small team of people. It was me, Carl Lieberman, Jess Monzi, Britton Taylor, and Mike Weiss. Like it was that small. Mike Weiss was the designer. And so leading up to it, we weren't sure where I was going to go. So I was doing all the research, and I was going on the internet. I was going on to eBay. I was buying all kinds of crap off of eBay because it's just so fun just to, spend the company's money on
KFC stuff, like our old KFC stuff.
Yeah. I found like there's all these old Colonel Sanders banks. And, I remember KFC from when I was a kid. My family would get it every once in a while, and it was like a special thing, and the bucket was cool, and Colonel Sanders was weird, and he's a pop culture icon and all that, all this stuff. And I know he's flawed and has all his problems. I also did a ton of research, by the way, of reading about the Colonel. So I scoured the internet for everything I could find visually. I scoured YouTube for every piece of footage I could find to hear his voice and hear how he talked, because it's like you have that thing was just set up to be successful, because the gold mine was left by this weird old man that was kind of a huckster and a grifter. And he just happened to make really good chicken, but I did a ton of research and reading to find out who he was and like where he came from. And because there was all the racism around him and all these things of fake chicken. And I was able to feel really good about working on the brand once I did all the research I did and found out about him. And there's a really great book written about him. I'm sure he was, did some bad stuff. I think he was a drunk. It would explain him going into the kitchens of KFCs and dumping the gravy on the floor and telling him to make it the right way.
And didn't he shoot a guy once?
He shot a guy, punched he was a lawyer, and he punched his client in the face. He would deliver babies. He was a rural amateur obstetrician in Indiana and Kentucky. He just was reinventing himself. So you had to admire the stick-to-itiveness that he had and all the things that he was doing, and the way that once he became Colonel Sanders, in the research that made it so fun to work on, he was, he had turned himself into an icon, dyed his hair, did all that stuff. And so that was really cool. So we were able to kind of look at all the old stuff that he did and all of the past things and look at the brand and say, this is when you were most successful. How do we harness this look and feel, modernize it for the, 2011 or 13, whatever it was when we started it. But still have it have some of that nostalgia to it, but also feel new. And we knew that it would have to be comedy. So it's kind of like, it was really the perfect storm for me personally, because it was all the thing like, oh, I get to go dumpster dive and I get to be funny. And so ultimately we built a deck that showed them that, and maybe we can find that deck and actually cut it in here, because I didn't find it, Bagley, but we showed them what their brand looked like before and what we thought the brand could look like. The bucket didn't have any of the Colonel's visuals on it. They were doing a how do you KFC campaign, a hashtag campaign. They were just trying to run as far away from the Colonel as possible.
So they basically weren't using any of the assets. They weren't using the bucket. They weren't using. They weren't even saying Kentucky Fried Chicken. They had changed it to KFC. And so you and the team at Wieden basically took them in a totally different direction by going back to their roots. Yeah. Which is really interesting. And then of course modernizing it, but really going back to those assets, which was the opposite of what they had been doing.
Yeah. They had in their brand book, they had a businessman with a briefcase doing a kickflip on a skateboard, and he had long hair. So yeah, they just had completely lost who they were. They were embarrassed of their food. Like they didn't want people to know that it was fried. They were like, the food's bad for you. The CEO at the time was like, look, guys, none of us are going to feed this to our kids, right? He was legit George W. Bush. But he didn't like what he was doing. And so you have us come in, and this is a big thing that I think it's for art directors and writers. Like, if you're passionate about something, if you can find, I always did this. I tried to find the thing that the brand had that I would get excited about. And for KFC, it was easy because I had all this paper trash I was buying off of eBay, and I could come in and then I could do I'm a mimic, so I could do the Colonel's voice, and they loved that. They knew they had the CMO, these franchisees who knew Colonel Sanders, like sat on his lap when they were children. They didn't like Novak because he didn't like the brand. So we come in and we're all excited about it. And then I can kind of mimic Colonel Sanders in a way that they're like, oh my God, here's people that love our brand, And
just so people understand what you're saying, when Baldwin says he mimicked Colonel Sanders, he literally did the voice on a number of campaigns, and you did it on the Waze app, and so
the robot, the Colonel robot, 24 hours of
actually the voice of Colonel Sanders on a number of occasions.
Yes, it's just a quick plug for myself, genericbaldwin.com. I'm a voice actor as well. If you'd like to use me, genericbaldwin.com.
That's Baldwin's new career. In all seriousness, you got to check out his site and his.
It's not launched yet. It's not live yet, but I'll tell you when it's live, Bagley.
Yeah, but
I'm waiting for one more video.
He's a very talented voiceover actor and can be hired. And I personally have already hired him.
Yes, it was fun. I love that.
So
that's the best.
So do we have anything?
Let's show that. Should we show this video? And then it's 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Yeah, we can just show. Has some art direction and design, but it was kind of also just the approach that was taken on that brand, initially led by Carl Lieberman and Eric Baldwin and Jess Monzi and Britton Taylor and the gang, and then
so this will be
years.
This is after a few years into it, and then I'll take you back and show you some of the original sort of basic layouts that we did to get them on board, and you can kind of see we start. What we started with was pretty simple and basic to get them on, to warm them up, and so I think that's the other thing a lot of people don't realize is that it took us a few years to slowly chip away at sort of their bad instincts of wanting bad work. And this video is kind of the pinnacle of that. Okay. We're stopping our videos, Bagley. We're sharing our screens. I'm sharing my screen. Sorry. Here we go.
2017 was a great year for Colonel Sanders, 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 and me, Colonel Sanders. In 2017, I just wanted to make everybody feel all tender and crispy about my fried chicken. But it's hard to make people fall in love with you in a 30-second TV ad. That's why I, Colonel Sanders, decided to launch a chicken sandwich into space, make a robotic Colonel Sanders that you could order food from, write a romance novel, make myself a playable character in WWE 2K18, create an e-store where KFC fans can purchase pillows and $20,000 meteorites shaped like a chicken sandwich, and even a cell signal blocking dome you can eat dinner in with your families. So cozy. Create a 30-minute long pot pie-based meditation system. Announce the first ever female Colonel Sanders. Make a virtual reality training experience / escape room. Make these handsome Halloween masks. Make the world's smallest functioning fast food restaurant. Or make a fancy highfalutin cooking show on Bon Appetit. Auction off a bunch of my belongings during a live auction on Instagram. Invent a new form of GPS that uses only my voice and cassette tapes. Team up with Green Lantern in a DC comic. And unfollow everyone on Twitter, and then refollow just the Spice Girls and 6 guys named Herb. Get it? 11 herbs and spices. It may not seem like a big deal, but a couple billion eyeballs seem to care. Yeah, it was a pretty good year. I only wish I was named the world's sexiest chicken salesman by a particular trendy magazine. Oh wait, would you look at that? That's a pretty finger-licking good year, if I do say so myself.
Okay. So
that was Baldwin's voice on that video as well.
It's true. It's very true. And that you get a glimpse in there. You can see the branding, the red and white, that we try to maintain throughout. Obviously the Colonel's was a character that we are able to use as a icon for consistency, but it wasn't like a total get out of jail free card. You still had to have the branding in there just for the clients and the brand recognition of that stuff. So these are some of the posters when we first started working with them. One of the things that we did to get them excited about the campaign was, a similar exercise that, that we'd done the Powerade assignment, which was writing lines and trying to come up with some visual images that we delivered them to them, and under the idea that they would hang these up in their office, or they could be ads. They're just sort of like, ad-like objects. Just kind of look at them for how they are and see the levels of modernization. So yeah, it was, there was just tons of fodder to play with from Colonel Sanders, because so well documented. He was tied for the most famous person in the world in the 70s with Muhammad Ali, most recognizable person in the world. So I think is him digging his grave. I'm pretty sure. And I'm not kidding. He built his grave many years before he died and would visit it often. So, here you see we're trying to play with that string tie as an element. We also are really interested in playing with the bucket as an element, because they just weren't using it, and the bucket design was terrible. And so we wanted to get at redesigning that, but we also like this idea of trying to make the bucket an icon in different ways. If hard work were easy, it'd be called easy work. Oh, I guess I should do it like this. Hard work were easy, it'd be called easy work, or just work, since there would technically be only one kind. There are two types of people in this world, and they both like original recipe chicken. From a time before salad. So this, the first two are kind of screwing with archival footage. What if we stripped it back really far back and just had it as a bucket icon? And I think some of these are in their offices today. There are a few problems a bucket of fried chicken can't solve. So then here's an attempt of like, okay, what if we start bringing a new Colonel into it, or Colonel elements? So maybe you don't see his face. How could we use the Colonel? And again, still making that bucket an icon.
What if one of his fingers is kind of crooked from arthritis, and what happens then?
Yeah, exactly.
But like I love how this all looks modern, but it has an iconic archival look to it as well. So you're playing with those elements, but with a modern twist, which is great.
Yeah. And some of this stuff, this was early on, and it took them years to let us get to this simple. Hard work is like a bucket of chicken. Think about that for a minute.
Just think about it.
Free chicken with purchase of every bucket. The other thing that we did was, and maybe we can cut this into Bagley. I don't have a copy of this anymore. But we put together we called it a brand book. It wasn't a brand book. It was just a visual, like a mood, kind of a mood book. And we went through, it was Mike Weiss and John Marshall and Carl and I, and Mike and I had gone. So I didn't say for the archive trip for KFC, we went to Kentucky, and they had an old abandoned cave that they had turned into a storage facility because there's no moisture in the cave, and super dry, perfect temperature. And we went through all of Colonel Sanders' like personal effects. There were like awards that he had won. We found like his fez from being a Mason or something. He had bronze cast hands and face of Abraham Lincoln.
Wow.
Which was just weird. But we were able to dig through all of that. We took a scanner, we took a camera, and we just photographed and scanned everything that we could find, and cataloged the whole thing. And then we would just use that as evidence as to why we can, here's this thing from the past that he did in the past. We should do something like this. We could use it to justify design, use it to justify ideas. So we put that book together based off of all that research that we did, and it had all kinds of like tip-in kind of pieces that would come out. And that book, a lot of those images were in that book, and that was the book that really kind of got them, that made it all click for them, because it was a modern interpretation of it. It had the sense of humor in it. It was just, that was kind of what is it when it's not a bad thing, because that wouldn't be the nail in the coffin. It wouldn't be the last straw. It was the linchpin, the keystone,
the linchpin. Yeah. Those both work.
That was the turning point kind of when we shared that with them. They loved it. And those are fun to do. It's like that. They didn't ask us to do that. That's the other thing you asked me why I like about advertising is because we could justify making a book like that, even if they weren't going to buy it, because it helped us sell a million things down the line, and it's fun. It's fun to make a book like that.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that as an art director, I think one of the things that I would take away from your example is that you are always going above and beyond of like, what else would be cool? What, like, not just what we were briefed, but what would be cool? What else could we design? Where could design and art direction improve this brand and be fun? And you just would do those things and present them to the client and try to get them excited about them, and not just limit yourself to the scope of that particular brief.
Yeah.
And then that really, without that, I don't think KFC would have become what it did, because you guys sort of set the vision. You helped them see what their brand could be in a lot of ways, but really from a design and art direction standpoint.
Yeah. I think, we knew it was all up for grabs. And if we were going to do this rebrand, they were in such bad shape. So we just kept bringing we redesigned the buckets. We helped redesign the stores, all the packaging, wrote lines for all that. I think they're still using all of it. They really should and do another update. But I think that the other thing that does is it starts to show the people around you that once those things go through, like once you're able to say, hey, here's this thing you didn't ask for, and they buy it, like KFC Ltd was an example of that. The e-commerce store, the website where we sold products for KFC was a thing that we just told them they should do. And they were into it, and they expected it to be probably cheesy Colonel Sanders t-shirts. And we came with meteorites and, that Fried Chicken USA sweatshirt I love so much because it doesn't even say KFC on it, And so we got to that point to where they trusted us enough, and everything we were doing, luckily, worked out. Like that KFC got all the headlines that we needed to justify making that thing. And then you have people out in the world, who are wearing that stuff. And somebody bought that meteorite for what, $20,000 or something?
Yeah.
Which is insane. Like you do those things and you're like, nobody's going to get into this. Nobody's going to, and then a meteorite that was
laser cut into a zinger chicken sandwich shape.
Yeah. It came in the office. I got to smell it. It smelled, I know what space smells like now, Bagley.
Yeah, I know. We both held that thing.
Oh, did you get to hold it too?
Yeah.
Nice.
I have a picture with it. So some principles that I'm gathering, and then maybe you can add to this. Set a high bar for yourself as an art director, and of the impact that design and art direction can have on a brand and a campaign. And I see so much art direction that just feels like they just sort of did what they thought was the thing to do. Like, oh, this is this type of brand and it's this type of ad, so it's this totally expected approach to the art direction. What I see in your work is you're always trying to bring as much to the art direction as everything else, and set a high bar and try to do something unique, but also something strategically, creatively that makes sense, that's supporting the concept. But what else would you add to that? Like, what are the best art directors in the world, which I consider you one of, and you've also worked with many of them. What do they do that sets them apart from the average art director?
Sorry for cutting Jason and Eric off. If you want to listen to the remainder of this podcast, check out schoolofastonishingpursuits.com and apply for Creative Mega Machine. If you get in, Jason Bagley himself will teach you the secrets and techniques to doing the best work of your life, getting better creative opportunities, making more money, and having more fun. We hope you enjoyed the first part of the episode, and we hope to see you in the second.